Hi everyone, welcome to the Model Gaming Show. I'm your host, GWFawkes, and this is the first live test rehearsal. Hopefully in the future when I start doing this, I'll look a little bit better, have my forehead a little bit less shiny, but other than that, this is what it's going to be. So to start off this week, just going to dig right into new releases. You got South Park, The Fractured But Whole, coming in at an 83 on OpenCritic. Gran Turismo Sport for the PS4 coming in at a 76, and WWE 2K18 a 74, which is actually a significant drop from I think the last year's, which was high 80s if I'm not mistaken, or at least mid 80s. But small story for tonight. Sony Music Entertainment wanted to utilize more of their brand, and so they created a new publishing studio or company called Unties, or Unties, however it is pronounced. But what's interesting is they said they're going to produce indies basically for PC, PS4, and the Switch. They dropped the Switch. The only game that anyone knows of right now is a game called Tiny Metal, but they said there's several games in development and that they are looking to expand their brand and use every part of their Sony Music Entertainment group. There's two main stories I want to talk about tonight, and the third kind of ties in with the second, so it's like two and a half, but they go together. The first is Activision filed a patent for microtransactions in multiplayer games. The layman's terms breakdown that this equates to is what they're thinking is online multiplayer. You have a better player who's been playing, just say for a month, and he's got a special hat, gun, whatever, and they see that the tendencies of this worse player might like that hat, and so they'll match up both of these players so that the good player essentially kills or beats the worst player, and the worst player goes, oh, I want that item now, I want that hat, how did you get that hat? And so it's basically like subliminal messaging. It's actually kind of ingenious, and if it wasn't so horrifying, I'd give them a pat on the back. This is just a patent, it hasn't happened yet, but with the way everything's going, loot boxes and whatnot, I would not be surprised. Plus, how would you really know if it's happening? It would all happen without you knowing, right? That's why I say subliminal messaging. So it's very interesting, the ramifications of it, at least, that they would start matchmaking. In fact, better players with worse players, I think, is the most interesting part of that they bring up, because then they're going out of their way to make it a balanced game. Obviously, again, it's just a patent, but I think that is the most interesting aspect of this, because obviously companies want to make money, right? But they would go after pure money over fair and balanced gameplay. And I feel like in this age of Twitter and everything like that, where everything is so immediate, that would be picked up on players, by professional players and amateur players, that, man, I keep getting matched up with these better guys or worse players too frequently when you want to play people your own skill level. There's a ton to go with this patent, but that was the gist. But I actually think that if it's done in a purely cosmetic way, there's nothing really wrong with it, especially if it doesn't affect the balance of the multiplayer match. If it's just them matching people that have an item that don't have the item, maybe that person wants that item. And if the only way to get it is to pay for it, that's what Overwatch does. So maybe that's happening in Overwatch and you just don't know it. There's no way to really know unless just say Blizzard came out and said, yep, we're doing that. I mean, it is Activision Blizzard, so even though Activision patented it, Blizzard might have said, hey, we've been doing this already, maybe you want to actually make that a thing now and patent it so that other companies would pay us for it, to use that. Just a thought, and I just think it's interesting. Again, just a patent, nothing's moved forward. but I think that's a very interesting way for how microtransactions and things will work, and how companies are always trying to sell the next thing. Our main topic tonight is EA closing Visceral, and then in effect, the canceling essentially the Star Wars game. Not canceling. They haven't come out and said canceled, but they're going in a new direction. The corporate speak of this statement is so bad. It's really quite funny. So the main thing that I took away, that I think most talking heads are, is that the way he put the game is, yes, it's a very linear story-driven game, and we really want something that people will come back for. And what's funny is that's what everyone wants. When you hear the maker's director, Amy Hennig, from Uncharted series, is going to make a Star Wars game, you expect a linear, story-driven game. Last time I checked, the Uncharted series is one of the most beloved series in all of video games. They are excellent, every single one of them that I've played. I've played 1 through 3, haven't played 4 yet, or Lost Legacy, but just look at the review scores. I mean, they're some of the highest rated games on the systems. So that being a bad thing wouldn't be bad, but the way that they phrase it is, we want players coming back for years to come. The really weird thing for me is they have a game coming out called Star Wars Battlefront 2, right? Where that is a game that people are they're encouraging people to come back with new maps, look at all the things that we can do, and to come back and play it again and again. And you already have another game in Anthem. So basically their speak sounded like, yeah, we want to make a Destiny 2, but that's what Anthem is. So for them to not go forward on this, now they basically said, yeah, we're going to split up the team Visceral that's been making this game, and we're going to give it to another studio that's kind of been working on it, and bring in other people, and hopefully we'll take the team at Visceral and put them whatever. But EA is closing Visceral Games for good, and Amy Hennig, it certainly seems like she's out, which now that's 2 companies in a row that she's kind of been ousted of mid-game, which has got to be extremely frustrating to essentially waste what could be 5 years of your life total between Uncharted 4 and this game, and to have those games reworked entirely or scrapped. It sounds like this is going to be, they're going to use as many assets as they can to salvage this game, but they are going to completely change it. They keep saying that they focus tested and they had players say, oh, like it's got a blaster in it. Listen, you always are inclined, I'm always inclined, especially with a big corporate company like EA, to think of the worst, right? But maybe people were focus testing it and saying it's not good. But realistically, this is Star Wars. If it was a story-driven Star Wars game made by the makers of Uncharted, that's going to sell bonkers no matter what. I mean, hell, the Uncharted games sell really well. If you just made a Nathan Drake game but had that be Han Solo, that, I guarantee you, that game would sell double what Uncharted does, because it's Star Wars. So that's why, for me, this decision is completely mystifying. I just frankly don't get it, because you can have that story-driven game, and maybe you could reuse assets anyways and create something else. That's the big thing for me, is that this game was supposed to come out in their fiscal year 2019. Well, that's still next year. That could have been fall, so that could have been a year away. So it seems like late in the life cycle, right? That if this was going to be a fall 2018 game, or even winter, right? If it came out in January, I think fiscal year runs like April to April or March to March or something like that. But they were still going to be in that. So for them this late in the game to scrap it is really odd. The final thing that ties in to all of this that I want to talk about is, for me, EA completely squandering the Star Wars license. If there's one franchise where I'm screaming, milk this franchise, it's Star Wars. If the only other property I can think of that I still don't understand why it hasn't happened yet that I want to relate it to is Batman. If I'm DC, I'm putting out a friggin' Batman movie every year. Different take. You can have one guy like Ben Affleck playing the main line all the way through the Justice League movies, and you have that one singular story. But people love Batman so much, and Superman as well, that you could make side stories. You could do Superman's All-Stars. You could do you could do Batman Year One. You could do so many different movies based on the Batman and Superman properties, just as side projects, and have different people representing Batman, right? So you compare that to Star Wars. Look at how many characters there are. There's I was watching Easy Allies, and Daniel Bloodworth made a great point in that he said they might miss the entire trilogy before a game comes out. Can you imagine that they will have Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and whatever Episode 9 is, and a Star Wars game might not come out to coincide with those? Yes, you have the Star Wars Stories brands, the one-offs that are every other year too, but that's not the point. Again, if there's any franchise that you should really be milking, it is Star Wars. I mean, hell, maybe they don't have the manpower. Maybe that's it. But if I'm EA and I've got all their sports teams, right, and all their sports games that come out every year, that takes up a lot. I would have absolved Visceral, absolved other teams, and put them on making 5 games right now. You should do what you are doing with the movies with your video games. EA it's confounding, really. I don't understand it at all. They're taking like a break, man. They're taking it easy. The Battlefront 2 is a very specific type of game, and for me, it's a single player game. That game will come out. I'll wait until it drops, $30 or something like that, and I'll play the main story, but I'm not really interested in the multiplayer aspect, and a certain lot of people are. But I was really looking forward to that story-driven game, and I was really looking forward to their 10-year deal with LucasArts to make games, and they're not. So it's just very interesting how you have the most popular license in the world. I mean, hell, Disneyland's got Star Wars right as that hit, man. Right as they made that deal, it's like Star Wars all out. Let's get Star Wars everywhere. As it should be. It's probably the most popular brand on the planet for entertainment like that. I mean, the movies are going to make $1 billion each time they come out, and all the figurines and action figures, there's so many different characters. Hell, you could make so many different types of games. Imagine, just for example, off the top of my head, Halo Wars, right? You could do a Star Wars version of that, a Star Wars version of XCOM. You can pick and choose from strategy, first-person shooter, make another, shoot, I'm forgetting the name. It was a good squad-based first-person shooter where you had, in Star Wars, make another one of those. I mean, hell, there's already existing properties. Make another KOTOR. I mean, it's just mind-boggling why they're resting on their laurels and essentially wasting the most popular brand. So that's my piece for tonight. I hope you enjoyed it. And you can catch me out every Thursday here starting at 7:30. I know this is a short show, but don't have any questions or anything from audience members yet, and it's just going to vary on the weeks on what I want to do. I was thinking of doing a Contrarian Corner again, but Contrarian Corner with Activision saying they haven't made good games, or with Visceral, but I like them too much. Their Dead Space is one of my favorite games ever. It's probably my favorite horror game that I've played, and so I didn't want to crap on them anymore. I really want to thank anybody who's watching this live or on the archive. It means a lot to me that you're tuning in. I want to thank GWFawkes for badass painting right behind me as the backdrop. My friend Ryan Johnson, known as Brother Johnson, for creating the music you're hearing underneath me, and my buddy Mike Selmar for doing all the graphics that you're going to see in the future. And thank you very much for tuning in, and have a good night.